There are a lot of different weapons in Fallout 4, the majority of which are designed to do immediate damage. But there's one weapon that requires some patience and planning to be able to use effectively. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only a Syringer? Seeing as the Syringer is a weapon based on syringes, I decided to be an old man and name myself Arthur Bernard Chesterfield, because Arthur Bernard Chesterfield wouldn't fit, and to prove that I know my ABCs. Regarding special, I put 9 points into intelligence to level up faster, and to get access to the gun nut perk as soon as possible. Perception and luck are worthless, and charisma at 5 to have lower prices when buying presents for my grandson. I noticed before leaving that there isn't an animation of Nora picking up Sean. She goes from standing in front of the crib to holding him, but you can't finagle the camera enough to see her pick him up. I tried to bring a tricycle I stole into the vault with me, but it disappears into the Shadow Realm just after passing the bridge. So I settled on a cone, went down into the vault, and my cone was gone. The usual vault stuff happened: frozen, murder, theft of an inanimate object, and waking up inside the freezer. Just a wholesome good time all around. Escaping the vault is as easy as putting a rake in the lake. Just slam the doors closed behind you so the radroaches can't bite off your kneecaps, snag the Pip-Boy, and you're out of the vault. As always, my first stop was Sanctuary to check on Codsworth and to up my endurance because why not, and begin destroying what remained of an already destroyed neighborhood. I wasn't gonna go crazy with the wood this time. I didn't even have the Idiot Savant perk. I only cut down a couple dozen trees and put down like 650 fence posts. It leveled me up a few times. I picked the few perks I could that would benefit me early on, mostly regarding the amount of damage I can take, and left to head towards Diamond City. I went ahead and let Preston clear out the area in front of the Museum of Freedom, let Trudy kill the raiders giving her trouble, and pressed onward. Like most gimmick weapons that are a complete nightmare to use, the Syringer is only available in a few locations. There are actually about a dozen different places where you can find a Syringer, but I'll have to go to Diamond City anyway, so why not just get my weapon from there? Paladin Dance bravely fought off a small army's worth of ghouls while I stood on top of a sign and laughed about how savagely they beat him. I looted all the corpses he'd made, left, and eventually arrived at Diamond City, where I spoke to Dr. Sun and finally bought my Syringer. Now, here's the thing about the Syringer. It is awful for a few reasons. The first is that, unlike, say, the Commu-Whacker or the Fat Man, there are no damage boosting perks that apply to it. Rifleman boosts the damage of non-automatic rifles by 10%, but not the Syringer. Bloody Mess provides a flat 5% boost to all damage, except for the Syringer. None of the weapon modifications affect damage either, because why would they? And to make matters worse, you can't find any ammo for the Syringer. You can't buy ammo for the Syringer. You can only craft it. The most useful syringe is the Bleed Out syringe that does 30 damage over 10 seconds. It requires 1 fiberglass, 1 oil, and 1 steel to craft. I'd scrapped just about everything I had, bought some junk from Trash Can Carla, and only had enough to craft 8 Bleed Out syringes. I bought a few more things from the vendors in Diamond City and was able to craft 5 more syringes. But just think about it for a second. 13 syringes that do 30 damage each is 390 damage. A 10mm pistol does 18 damage per shot. To do the same amount of damage with a 10mm pistol as you would with 13 bleed-out syringes, you'd need 22 shots. It's terrible. That's enough complaining, for now anyway. My goal was to get this over with as quickly as possible, so I spoke to Ellie to get the location of Nick Valentine, did the interview with Piper for some easy experience, stole some of her sister's stuff, played in the bus, and left to make my way to Park Street Station. I stopped by an encampment of raiders to test out the Syringer. It took 3 syringes to kill a simple raider scum. The first one I missed, the second drained most of his health, and the third finished him off. I reloaded a save because I wasn't wasting almost a quarter of my ammo to kill one raider, and I entered Park Street Station. I started to use the syringes themselves on the triggermen, but it became obvious that it would be ridiculously impractical jokers to only use the syringes. I'd have to spend hours and hours farming materials just to get enough syringes to clear out Park Street Station. I did try to find a glitch that would let me duplicate ammo, but nothing I found seemed like it would work. Admittedly, I only spent like 10 minutes looking, but it doesn't matter. This is a Syringer-only playthrough, which means beating people to death with the Syringer is allowed. Kinda misleading, but allowed nonetheless. The problem now is that I did not plan for gun bashing, meaning that I can't get any of the useful perks to make it better. Realistically, it wouldn't have been that difficult to grind for XP at a settlement by making shelves or something. I'd need around 5 levels to be able to put enough points into strength to be able to get the Basher perk. I'll spoil the surprise and tell you that I never did that. I did, however, keep pushing my way through the Triggermen until I got to Dino. I gave him an injection of probably irradiated nonsense, rescued the bobblehead, and began making my escape with Nick. The remaining Triggermen weren't too bad. Some die in one whack, some take several, but gun bashing doesn't drain that many action points. By the time you've done one and can do another, most of the points have regenerated, so you can pretty much bash as quickly as the game will let you. I convinced Darla to leave Skinny Malone, allowing Nick and I to escape the vault and agree to meet back up at Diamond City. I went ahead and scrapped a bunch more stuff at Sanctuary to hopefully make more syringes. I've been told that this isn't necessary, but it's the way I've always done it, and I'm sure my dad and his dad before him would have done this too if they knew how to play Fallout 4. My adventures in composting were less impressive than I'd hoped. I was back up to 11 syringes. You already know why that sucks. I raided Arturo's house and stole most of Diamond City's crops before meeting back up with Nick to discuss the very slight inconvenience of my missing son. Smooth talked the mayor into giving me a key, took almost everything from Kellogg's house, and ignored Dogmeat after leaving Diamond City because I've got things to do. To be specific, some bird at Bunker Hill has all the fiberglass in the world and has been hoarding it for herself. It falls on me to right that wrong. Fiberglass is not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. 1,600 caps for 25 pieces, making ammo for the Syringer some of the most expensive to make in the game based on nothing, but I'm saying it anyway. I sort of blacked out at Sanctuary when I was scrapping some stuff. The shipment was gone, but I only had 7 fiberglass. Not entirely sure what happened. Reloading a save and not scrapping the shipment seemed to solve the problem. And amazingly, it was now oil that was limiting my ability to create weaponized syringes. The silver lining is that I was able to tag both fiberglass and oil for searches, so finding both components will be slightly easier going forward. With enough syringes to kill a baby elephant and both of its parents, I hit the road in search of Fort Hagen. I beat 2 guys to death because their argument about sandwiches bothered me, and nothing else entertaining happened on the way to Fort Hagen. After sitting in place for 12 hours to wait for Dogmeat to mosey his way up to the base, I told him to leave and entered Fort Hagen. Guess what? The Syringer doesn't work on synths, so there's that, which is just awesome. The synths, or enough of them at least, are rather tough. Instead of wasting all my stim packs, I went back to the Museum of Freedom to help out the single remaining Minuteman. Thankfully, the raiders inside are a low level and not a threat by any stretch of the imagination. This was less about helping Preston and more about getting my body inside a set of power armor. And if you're wondering how many syringes it takes to kill a Deathclaw, about 8. I know because I wasn't about to spend 20 minutes waiting for Preston to do all the work for me, and beating the Deathclaw to death was never an option. I'm not Frank Horrigan. Despite only having 40% left in my fusion core, I took my glorified blowgun and barely power armor back to Fort Hagen to take on Kellogg. I mostly ignored the synths and went through the base about as quickly as I could without sprinting. They did occasionally block hallways or doorways, which was annoying, and they followed me into the safe room, but other than that, they weren't too bad. Then there's Kellogg. In an amazing turn of events, the Syringer doesn't work on him. Everything has to be a pain in the ass. I also forgot to get any psycho, and my power armor died about halfway through the fight because I forgot that gun bashing drains the fusion core. It took a bit of effort and more stim packs than I would have liked, but Kellogg joined my dog in hell. I took his brain, watched the Pridwin arrive, and interrupted Nick and Piper's private time in Nick's office. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten to put my clothes on, but I thought my bare chest worked rather well with my impossibly white mustache and glasses. The next task was simple: Dr. Amari in Good Neighbor. I hate going to Good Neighbor. It's such a pain in the ass to find, and the game slugs whenever I get near that part of town. Then again, that might be more of an iMac issue than a Bethesda issue. I spotted Deacon in Good Neighbor and tried to kill him. Did not work very well. Cleo mounted me and got blood all over the place. I spoke to Amari, did the stuff in Kellogg's Frosted Memories, and left Good Neighbor to head to the Glowing Sea. After about 8 minutes of walking, I managed to lure a rad scorpion to the Crater of Adam to kill the zealots worshipping the radiation. They wiped the floor with that scorpion. Its brothers were nearby and overheard the commotion, causing them to come over and wipe out an entire chapter of the Children of Adam. Virgil was as uninteresting as he always is, rambling on about coursers and plans and serums and general sadness. Tradition dictates that I ignore the quest objective and head straight to Green Tech to track down the courser. This entire thing is like Fort Hagen on steroids. The gunners take a solid 5 bashes each to take down, there are a lot of them to deal with, and then there's the courser. I decided to just ignore them as best I could. My best was not very good. I got lost on the upper level, and a douchebag with a missile launcher was willing to end his life if it meant I'd go down with him. I eventually got to the elevator, took a ride, and confronted the courser. The courser, being a courser, is immune to the Syringer, so once again, my only option was to bash it to death. The gun bash, with my frail body and lack of any strength perks, is quite ineffective. Add in the multiple stealth boys and several stim packs the courser uses, and you've got yourself a recipe for mayonnaise and jello tacos, or something else that's equally as horrible. This felt like it took forever, but it really only took about 2 minutes. Still, 2 minutes of constant attacks is nothing to sniff a stick at. With the chip in hand, I returned to Virgil to see if you could skip visiting Amari for the second time. You can't, and she was as worthless as ever, forcing me to find the railroad. There was a legendary ghoul in the church. I only killed it because I had a glimmer of hope that it would drop a legendary Syringer. I got almost the exact opposite. Found the railroad, got the chip decoded, watched a brief video showing how to repair blinds because my window fell and fucked up mine, returned to Virgil for the last time, and began siding with the Brotherhood. Logic would dictate that I side with the Institute. Any other faction will have me fighting synths who are immune to syringes. But I sided with them last time, and I didn't feel like doing it again. The Minutemen are monotonous, and the Railroad has you working undercover for the Institute or the Minutemen, so the Brotherhood is the most interesting choice. Before I could get the Interceptor built, I had to go with Dance to Arcjet Systems, which was interesting for the sole reason that I could actually attack while I was in there. Dance did most of the work, but I was able to take credit despite doing next to nothing, which is something I'm great at. Once that was done, I rode up to the Pridwin, met Captain Boring, the Elder, and everyone else on board the blimp, and realized what a colossal mistake I'd made by siding with the Brotherhood. I have to clear out Fort Strong. Strong is a super mutant companion in Fallout 4. The math tells us that the enemies at Fort Strong will be super mutants and a super mutant behemoth. I knew I'd need more syringes. So I absorbed a bunch of punishment, discovered Fort Strong so I could fast travel there later, and returned to Bunker Hill to buy more supplies. With everything I'd hoarded, I managed to make 31 syringes, for a total of 36, the most I'd ever had at a single time. I then went back to Fort Strong. There were a couple problems. I was lower on stim packs than I should have been. There were a bunch of muties, which meant I was taking a ton of damage at all times. Weapon bashing is terrible, and the 30 damage from syringes ain't shit. It eventually occurred to me that I could take the Lead Belly and Aqua Boy perks to make water my friend. Bash mutants until my health is nearly depleted, then retreat and drink water to get my health back without getting a ton of radiation. For the behemoth, my only option was syringes. Luckily, he would only go so far, meaning I could attack him from a distance. Like when I was in high school. Nobody wanted anything to do with me, but they could still do emotional damage from afar. It took 16 syringes to bring down the big boy. Inside was worse. There was no water to drink, and the mutants were just as tough as those outside. At one point, I did the unthinkable and put a skill point into strength to do more damage. I also started using the bleed out syringes to do damage while I beat those mutants to death. The basement was unpleasant, as there was a former human down there with a missile launcher. Dance arrived just in time to tell me what a good job I did. Maxon told me to report to Ingram to begin construction on the teleporter. I had a slight issue getting enough generators, and I got the cords all tangled up, but aside from that, and Ingram being a stupid idiot by being in the way, I got it constructed easily enough and went inside the Institute. The robot boy had white hair, just like Father and actual Father. I convinced him that I was on his side, then double-crossed everyone by assassinating Dr. Madison Lee. What really happened was that she got caught up in the crossfire when I accidentally beat her to death. At least that's what Maxon thinks. Ingram explained to me that Liberty Prime is their secret weapon and sent me to find Dr. Skara. She was supposed to be in Diamond City. Now she resides in a bowling alley ran by robots with ironic names. I tried to kill her too, just to see what would happen, but you can't. The player can truly do whatever they want, except for, like, a lot of things, because that many branches in a quest line is impossible. From there, I had to find a high-powered magnet. This was very suck. It was sorta my fault, mostly not my fault. I decided, after what I went through at Fort Strong, that I wasn't going to fight my way through all the super mutants. That, in and of itself, isn't the worst thing to deal with. Just run past them all until you get what you need. Problem is, the door I needed to get through was locked, and I didn't know where the key was. Oh, and a super mutant suicider followed me inside, and if I stopped moving, it would catch up to me and detonate, causing death, among other things. It took me about 10 minutes and several reloaded saves to figure out where the key was. Then I actually had to get the souvenir magnet, which wasn't actually that bad. I went back to the airport, built the magnets, and was sent back into hell to find a bunch of nukes. They really want me to face my fears. The situation inside Sentinel's site was similar to what happened a few sentences ago. A lot of baddies that I chose to ignore instead of fight got in my way. The bigger hindrance here was the ghouls blocking my path. Thankfully, none of them were glowing ones or legendaries, so I could find the nukes, plant the signal, and get out of there without thinking about breaking out the shot glasses for my Drano. Liberty Prime was finally back online, but all is not well. Friends become foes in this episode of Dragon Ball Z. Paladin Dance has gone rogue, and it's up to me, the person who knows him better than anyone else, the person who just met him a few paragraphs ago, to track him down. And of course, by track him down, what I mean is mindlessly follow the waypoint. For a change of pace, I didn't kill Dance, and convinced Maxon to spare his life. Buzz Lightyear can now be my companion at any time, and all that stands between me and the end of this wretched existence is obliterating the railroad. I took Dance's power armor that was still on board the Prydwen, and went to the Old Norse church to make God cry. The railroad agents, for the most part, were complete pussies. Most took 3 hits to defeat. The idiots with names inside Railroad HQ were tougher, Glory especially, but they weren't too bad. I'd have syringed more of them, but I was down to 2, and I didn't want to waste them. I did waste 1 on Glory, just to see if it worked. It didn't. After they were finally gone for good, I quite literally spent 2.5 minutes staring at a goddamn loading screen. You know that thing that happens when you don't move for a while, where the camera starts panning around your character? That's what I saw after the loading screen. That's how long it was. All that's left is the beryllium agitator. Getting inside the building didn't make me want to blow my brains out too many times. The elevator was broken, I fixed it by flipping a switch, grabbed the agitator, and fate threw a curveball. The sentry bot you have to defeat, one of the toughest robots in the entire game, was a legendary sentry bot. Cool, awesome, swell, neat. Why? What's that saying? Whatever can happen will happen. This is proof of that. My initial plan was to use a stealth boy to hide and wait while Ingram did most of the work. She didn't stand a chance, neither did I, to be honest. I got lucky and found a tactic that worked. The sentry bot couldn't, or wouldn't, for religious reasons, fit through the doorway, meaning I could pop out, hit it with my gun, and retreat. It worked for a while, then I got greedy. All told, it took more time to kill this sentry bot than the Courser and Kellogg combined. And what did it drop? A rolling pin, of course. Why would it be anything useful? Then came the Assaultrons, significantly more annoying to be honest. Not because there was 2 of them, but because they do this thing where they put up their forearm as it spins, which blocks any melee attack you do. It felt like I could only do damage every 5 or 6 hits. The rest of the time they'd block it. So fucking frustrating. But once they and the cousin of Deputy Weld were dealt with, it was finally time to take the fight to the Institute. There was not a snowball's chance in hell that I was following Liberty Prime for 17 miles. Instead, I fast traveled to somewhere near CIT ruins and waddled my way to the ruins where Liberty Prime and everyone else were fending off hordes of synths. Father did the announcement that you do when you side with the Institute, something I never noticed before, which is actually a neat little detail. And I enter the Institute for the second and last time to end it all. As you probably saw coming, I was not going to fight the synths inside. I was too tired, lazy, and pissed off to do anything remotely badass. I did convince Father to give me the code to shut down some of the synths, and then glitch the game. I also used a console command one time to slow down the game for a moment, because I had to know if the Syringer actually fires a syringe. It does, by the way. And then I shot Father right between the eyes. I knew this bitch was a synth. Since the syringes didn't work on robots, I bashed his head off, pushed through to the reactor room, planted the charge, got teleported to the safety room, for the first time ever, told the kid that he could come with us, and got teleported to the safety of a roof where, as the Institute was engulfed in flames, I bashed Elder Maxon in the face and beat Fallout 4 with only a Syringer. The way Fallout 4 handles unique weapons is a significant departure from the ways of Fallout 3 and New Vegas. There are still unique weapons you can earn from quests or find in the world, but they've largely been replaced by legendary weapons with random effects that drop from tougher foes. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only legendary weapons? I ignored Codsworth, named myself Legendary, and started assigning special points. Because all weapon types can be used, there isn't one specific stat that's more important than the others. I drained Charisma and put a lot of the points into Intelligence to level up faster, but the rest are pretty spread out. I used my invisible legs to push a tricycle into the river as an experiment to see if it would still be there 200 years later. Saw the mushroom cloud, took a nap, had a nightmare, woke up, and used my patented close the doors technique to avoid the roaches and escape the vault. I forgot to see if the tricycle was still there, maxed out intelligence, and got to work scrapping every object known to man. Now's the time to explain what qualifies as a legendary weapon. For the purposes of this challenge, a legendary weapon is anything that has a legendary effect, but they don't necessarily have to have a prefix to be a legendary weapon. Kellogg's pistol refills your action points when you get a critical hit, which is the Relentless legendary effect. It doesn't have Relentless in its name, but is still a legendary weapon. If you happen to disagree with me, that's okay, feel free to dislike the video. After scrapping damn near everything I could find, I got to work laying down all the wooden poles in the world, almost 1,000 of them, to level myself up a few times. It took several minutes to do, and leveled me up about 4 times. The first few perks I picked were like my first wife, useful to have on occasion, but you wouldn't be losing much by not taking them. Next came the task of getting my paws on a legendary weapon. They're more powerful than your standard weapons, which makes them not the easiest thing in the world to obtain. I figured the smartest option would be to work with the Brotherhood early on. Completing the ArcJet quest gets you a legendary weapon. On my way to the police station, I encountered Wolfgang and convinced him to open fire on Trudy, hoping they'd all kill each other to give me something to laugh about. God wasn't thrilled with my desire for blood and sought to smite us all with heavy doses of radiation as punishment for my evil ways. Dance, and nobody else with a name worth mentioning, fought off the ghouls outside the police station. I ransacked their pockets for Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Dance and I waddled our way to ArcJet, and the nothing continued. I'm effectively a soundboard at this point. How many times can I say the same thing over and over and over again? Why are you even watching this? You already know what the answer is. Dance killed everything in his path until we got to the reactor area, and I did something stupid. I activated the rocket test and ran outside the blast room before it went off. In a shocking twist, standing 10 feet away from a rocket propulsion test turns your body into something that resembles melted ice cream tossed into a forest fire. One time I missed the jump to safety, so I took the blast like a man and died like a mouse. A few attempts later, I managed to get to safety. Dance didn't turn into paste. I snagged the deep-range transmitter, we left ArcJet, and I got my first legendary weapon. Righteous Authority, a laser rifle that makes critical shots do double damage, and the critical meter fills 15% faster. Seeing as I have luck at 1, this might as well be a normal laser rifle. I picked up most of the ammo and energy weapons off the synths inside ArcJet, so I had a pretty solid supply of ammo at my disposal. I went ahead and reported back to Dance at the police station to advance their questline a bit, then set out for Diamond City. I'd set the difficulty to normal, but after killing a raider in 2 shots, I cranked that bitch up to very hard for 2 reasons. The first is to satiate the masochist in me, and the second is because some people have ran their mouth at me for playing on the easiest difficulty. They can't grasp the simple concept that the challenge isn't supposed to come from the in-game difficulty setting. A third reason could be that legendary weapons are plenty powerful on their own. I realized, shortly after getting mentally, physically, and emotionally assaulted by a pair of Mirelurks, that very hard is, in fact, very hard. But I didn't let that deter me. I arrived at Diamond City, pockets lined with hopes, dreams, and garbage, sold most of that garbage to Arturo to buy some ammo. Fusion cells are stupid expensive, by the way, and got Nick's location from Ellie for no reason. Before leaving, I picked up trash for Baldy and came oh so close to frying his brain with my light gun after he called me a jackass. I left Diamond City in the dust and began my journey to the east. A super mutant laid down a sick voodoo spell with a missile launcher that exploded my leg after he died, and I started clearing out everyone at Charles View Amphitheater. They had little to no armor, meaning most of the diehard fanatics died in a few shots, but their bullets did big damage to my feelings and eventually killed me. Between sending all those cultists to the afterlife and helping some ghouls who should have been there a long time ago, I barely had any ammo left. Then, Swan bonked me on the back of the head with a boulder. The triggermen down in Park Street Station were about as tough as I expected. Some refuse to accept energy weapons as a legitimate class of weapons, so they take more shots than average to put to sleep. The first batch set me back a ways. I only had about a dozen shots remaining in my arsenal. I exited the facility and had a new target. There's a legendary pipe crying out for help in a sewer somewhere. I could feel it in my fingernails. The problem was that I entered the sewer with 5 shots remaining. Lady Luck was on my side. I managed to finish off the last raider with my last shot and to find Big Jim, the legendary pipe that has a 20% chance to cripple an enemy's leg. 18 damage isn't great, but melee weapons don't run out of ammo, which is why I needed it. With my tool in hand, I beat the monkey and tested out my wrench on a few raiders, returned to Diamond City, offed a synth and got eviscerated in record time, bought a few more combat batteries, and returned to Park Street Station to finish the job of rescuing Nikki. The pipe didn't do nearly as much damage against the triggermen as I would have liked. Still, it was useful to have something to fall back on. Like if you're shoveling snow and your shovel breaks, you could always just douse the snow in gasoline and melt it all. The problem of melee combat in Fallout 4 is as prevalent as ever. I loathe it. I tell you how much, but the last time I did, my Doom video got demonetized. Let me put it this way, I hate it about as much as my dead dog hated thunderstorms. I used the power of positivity to make quick work of Dino, rescued Nick, took a few wallops when beating the triggermen to death, used sneak attack bonuses along with the laser gun to wipe out what remained of Skinny Malone's gang before he knew what hit him, had a nearly 4-minute long loading screen despite Fallout 4 being played on an SSD, accused Nick of being in cahoots with the Neanderthals that stole my son, and got inside Kellogg's house. I followed Dogmeat to the entrance of Diamond City just to make sure he would eventually make his way to Fort Hagen, scrapped all my stuff in Sanctuary because I know me doing it this way bothers some people, installed a hook on my pipe wrench, and set sail for Fort Hagen. What's that saying? Step on a crack, break your mother's back. That applies to landmines too. Except instead of breaking my mother's back, it turned mine into cottage cheese dyed red and splattered on the ground. Kellogg had recruited my former and now feral ghoul neighbors in a last attempt to stop me from entering Fort Hagen. Didn't work. Pesky laws kept me from killing them before the war, but there was nothing to stop me this time. I met up with Dogmeat for the last time, he would never be seen again, and entered Fort Hagen. My first pro-gamer strat was to use the pipe, because the sound of metal scraping against metal turns me on, but also because I wanted to conserve ammo. Then it occurred to me that I could recover more ammo from each dead synth than it took to kill them, so it made logistical sense to use lasers to kill them all. I entered the fort with 41 laser bullets, and by the time I approached Kellogg, I had 369 bullets. Psycho and Jet allowed me to get the upper hand and eliminate Kellogg and his synths in less than 15 seconds. With Kellogg finally laid to rest, I returned to Diamond City to do an interview with Piper. She was gone, so I stole some of her stuff and talked to Nick about what to do next. My map pointed me towards Goodneighbor. On my way there, I stopped by Good Street Apparel to take out Clutch. His name applies to me, not him, and because there was a bounty on his skull. Also, at some point, I modified my Righteous Authority to do burning damage, because the burn of a laser was not burning enough. I did a bit of parkour after I left, not that I jumped on a bench fake parkour shit, got a few raiders hooked on death, killed Finn upon entering Goodneighbor, bought more ammo from the robot lady, and entered Kellogg's brain. On my way out to the glowing sea, I stopped by Bunker Hill to see if they had any ammo. This is always funny to me, being a foot away from Kessler but yelling anyway. Here, I found something neat. Spray and Pray, a legendary submachine gun that does explosive damage with each shot. The only problem is I can't afford it. I could've if I sold most of my ammo, but that would have defeated the purpose of buying it in the first place. I tried stepping on Cricket to get it off her corpse, didn't work. I really wanted that gun though. I wanted it so bad that I was willing to commit murder to obtain it. Every soul inside BATTFL building was sent on its way in my effort to find enough trash to sell to get it. I spent a fair bit of ammo inside that building and, spoiler alert, didn't get enough stuff to get my gun. Not that it would have mattered if I did, because Cricket was gone. I'd reloaded a save after I killed her the first time, so she's not in hell if that's what you're wondering. Defeated, I scrapped more stuff, looked at a few mods, and was off to obtain a new gun that's been lost at sea for some decades. The Syndromes at Easy Street Downs were not happy to see me. They were a tad bit troublesome to kill, and I didn't have a chance to loot their bodies as the Assaultron came after me. Thankfully, I was retreating to the sea regardless of whether a robotic whore was after me or not. I discovered Libertalia, sold a few things to make sure my inventory was at least a little clear, and took on the forces of Libertalia. Once I got on board the ship, I began using Kellogg's pistol because why not? Entered the boat interior and got this shotgun. It has a name that I'm not even gonna try to say. With another weapon added to my collection, I sold things at Diamond City and embarked towards the Sea of Green. Speaking of green, I killed a whole bunch of raiders inside a hardware store and made some green paint for that guy working on the wall at Diamond City. But just like the tricycle, I forgot to give it to him. I crossed paths with a legendary Red Widow bloodbug a ways into the glowing sea and got myself something worthless, and took the fight to ravenous zealots worshipping some heretic. If my sometimes official Christian Ratatouille fan club Discord server has taught me anything, it's that non-believers must be punished with a bullet. I attempted to kill Virgil when I found him, but this is a Bethesda game, so that's not an option. He told me about the Courser. What it was didn't matter, it would be dead before too long. Before killing something that technically wasn't even alive, I went ahead and cleared out the Museum of Freedom for some easy experience. Lured out the Deathclaw because there were Brotherhood troopers in the area, so I wouldn't have to deal with it myself, and saw a legendary Brotherhood scribe. Their life was forfeited the moment they entered mine. The stars aligned. What she dropped was actually pretty solid. The knight was a little tough to kill though. Green Tech Geriatrics was next. The timing could not have been better. I got a shotgun that does 50% more damage to humans just before entering a building filled with them. Yeah, it wasn't that great actually. Only firing 2 shots before reloading was a real hindrance. In fact, the other legendary shotgun I had was much more convenient, especially with the Nerd Rage perk. A legendary gunner guarded the entrance to the elevator and dropped a nifty little toothpick. Again, the timing was perfect. I tried to use it against the Courser after pumping myself full of Psycho and Jet, but it was just horrible. I switched to the shotgun and shot in the Courser's general direction until it died. I decapitated a few people and left to get some caps from the vendors at Bunker Hill before finally getting down to business. One of the locations Cricket can visit is Vault 81. I went there and waited in 8 to 12 hour chunks until she arrived, and I had the opportunity to buy Spray and Pray. The world was now my oyster. Dr. Amari was as worthless as ever. I entered the Old North Church, and my submachine gun fucking annihilated a legendary feral ghoul. Tinkerbell analyzed the Courser chip I found. I told Deacon I'd meet him somewhere, got the teleportation plans from the big green idiot, and then spoke to Deacon, primarily because I had a lot of 10mm ammo and wanted something to use it for. We, and by we I mean I, the only person who matters in this story, decided that we were going to their old base through the front door. The explosive machine gun made quick work of everything inside, even with the difficulty on hard. Then, because this game sucks, Deacon informed me that we can't go through the front because the elevator is busted. Nice job, Bethesda. You can do this quest 2 ways, but actually only one, because we couldn't put any effort into anything. I used Righteous Authority inside the base for the same reason in Fort Hagen. The ammo spent will effectively refill itself upon looting synth bodies. Deacon gave me Willie Whisper's old gun, and I got welcomed into the railroad. While I was down there, and because I had the caps to spare, I bought Tinker Tom's Special, a legendary hunting rifle, just to add more options to my arsenal of weapons. Then, for some reason, I did a quest for the railroad that involved clearing out a church full of raiders, meeting a fake person, and escorting him to a building for safekeeping. I knew I wasn't going to side with the railroad, but I did the quest anyway. From there, I rode up to the Bridwin with Dance, got my orders from Kells, who looked oddly shiny, listened to the king run his stupid mouth at all the people stupid enough to believe his message, met the necessary folks, tucked away inside the blimp, and ODST'd myself down into the water to begin the grueling task of ridding an island of super mutants. The normal mutants were not too terribly tough. Sure, they took at least 10 shots each to kill, but it was manageable. The behemoth was something else entirely. I could have knocked the difficulty down, but that would have been really lame. Instead, I used 130 shots from my laser gun to do most of the damage, and a single shot from my shotgun to finish him off. The mutants on the main level of the building were about the same as those outside. Those downstairs were different, primarily because one had a missile launcher. The second time, I was through playing around and explosive machine gunned their irradiated asses, spoke to Max, and got to work putting together the teleporter. Surprisingly, nothing went wrong this time. No cripples got in my way, I didn't run out of junk, and I got inside the Institute with no issues. I loaded a holotape with nonsense for Ingram, met Father, and decided right then and there that he must die. Everything in the Institute came after me, and I do mean everything. An ungodly amount of robots and peasants ran my way, all eager to die. Most were relatively low-level cannon fodder, and only served to add more ammo to my pockets. I looted most of the bodies I'd made upstairs, and was up to around 1,300 fusion cells. After taking the elevator back down, things got violent. This is where Spray and Pray really shines. Dozens of synths, all tightly packed into 3 small rooms, so that every bullet that explodes can do damage to multiple synths at once. Looting them took far longer than killing them did. I'd forgotten about those waiting for me by the teleporter. They were much trickier to deal with. I tried a few times to destroy them all, but the wider doorway allowed more of them to shoot at me at once, and the more open room they were in made the machine gun less effective than it was before. Then, I put 2 points into the commando perk to make the gun do 40% more damage. Well, 60 in total, but it went up to 60 from 20. That was a game changer, and made this gun far more destructive than even Beerus could imagine. At one point, I even stopped to make sure that I was still on hard because of how disgusting it was. Once all the synths stopped moving, I had somewhere around 3,400 fusion cells left, so I didn't even bother taking any of the ammo from the corpses. Maxon was pissed. What else is new? I traveled out to the bowling alley to recruit a scientist for our cause, made a few upgrades to a few of my weapons, and went to Aunt Mildred's hospital for the mentally unwell to retrieve a souvenir magnet for Ingram. The only thing of note inside there was the legendary super mutant that I burned to death with my laser gun the second I walked through the door. It dropped a mighty missile launcher which, while neat, wasn't actually all that effective in practice. After making the actuators, I was sent to the glowing sea to secure a few hundred nukes. This was frustrating. An enemy looming in the distance occupied enough of Scribe Halen's attention that I couldn't speak to her. Killing her failed the quest. Fast traveling back to the base did nothing, so I lured a pair of Assaultrons looming outside the nearby vault to her to see what would happen. The Assaultrons couldn't kill her for some reason. Once they died, I could talk to Halen and make my way out to the Sentinel site. The ghouls inside were all a joke. There was a legendary one on the inside that dropped something worthless. I accidentally used a stealth boy that literally lasted maybe 40 seconds, had a surprisingly hell of a time killing Adam's Wrath, secured the nukes, and returned to the Pridwin to find that Dance had gone AWOL. Tracking him down wasn't difficult, thanks to me knowing where he went and having a waypoint on my map pointing me to that exact spot. I used the double-barrel shotgun that did 50% more damage to slay him ironically, returned to the blimp, spoke to Shiny Face, and began wiping out the railroad. The agents they sent to stop me were formidable in their own way. Not frightening though, almost more annoying than anything else. Spray and Pray made a dog's dinner out of every one of the named NPCs down in Railroad HQ. I had another nice 3-minute long loading screen and went with the cripple to retrieve the beryllium agitator. Things got a little weird as we circled around the building before landing. Down in the reactor area, I took a sip of the water and turned into Meltman as it melted my insides and began fighting the robots. The sentry bot was tough as nails. It should be proud of how many shots it took to kill. The Assaultrons should not be proud. They were weak and deserved death. At the airport, Liberty Prime was finally back online, and there was not a hamster's chance in a garbage disposal that I was following that giant fuck all the way to the CIT ruins. I fast traveled someplace close to CIT ruins, fell into the river when trying to hide behind the guard railing, and did absolutely nothing while Liberty Prime and the Brotherhood forces cleared out the area of synths and blasted their way into the Institute. I still had well over 1,000 fusion cells, so I took my time destroying everything I could as I pressed deeper into the Institute. The combat monkeys were far harder to kill than I would have guessed. So tough, in fact, that I didn't even kill them. I did some quick scoping with a legendary hunting rifle because I hadn't gotten enough clips to add to my montage yet, and got a bloodied sledgehammer that does more damage the lower your health is. I thought this would work perfectly with the Nerd Rage perk. It didn't. I did do a sweet barrel roll when I died though. Once I used Father's Terminal to open up the barriers, a bunch of idiots blocked the doorway. I used Psycho, Jet, and Med-X to quickly annihilate everything guarding the reactor. Even the legendary synth died in seconds. I planted the charge. We got teleported to safety. I blew up the Institute. I blasted Elder Maxon with my remaining ammo as the screen faded to black, and I beat Fallout 4 with only legendary weapons.
We are Lizard Squad. As gay as Teletubbies, we have no bodies, and our only friends are the moms we have.
Despite the advancements Fallout 4 made to the Fallout franchise, some considered it to be a step back in certain areas of the game. The story is one of those areas, and with Fallout 4's first major DLC, Bethesda tried to remedy that. Can you beat Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC without taking any damage? Unlike Fallout New Vegas, there isn't a specific level requirement to start Far Harbor. Instead, you just have to get to a certain point in the story. The Getting a Clue quest must be completed. I could have made a new character that's as generic as possible, like I did for Fallout New Vegas' DLCs, but I really didn't feel like doing that. I loaded one of my prior saves from the Legendary Weapons Only playthrough, a save shortly after I rescued Nick Valentine, spoke to Ellie in Nick's office, and the DLC sorta begins. The first thing I did was strip myself naked and upgrade my limited arsenal of weapons at Sanctuary, and set off for the northeast corner of the map. You probably know the way this works by now. I used a console command to set my max health to 1, so that any damage of any kind will kill me and automatically reload my most recent save. I did have to remove 2 of my perks, Toughness and Nerd Rage, because they either provided annoying benefits or got in the way of me only being able to take 1 damage before dying. The only thing worth mentioning that happened on my way out to the Nakano residence was that I got myself stuck and diddled to death by a group of raiders who ambushed me shortly after I entered a tower. I spent several minutes there before I decided that the pain wasn't worth it, went around the area, and met Mr. and Mrs. Nakano. Their daughter is missing, and it's up to me to find out where she went. They couldn't be bothered to listen to the holotapes she left behind, or put any effort into anything at all. I admire that. These people are okay. Kasumi had gone down the unfortunate rabbit hole of questioning her very existence and wondering whether everything she remembers is a figment of her imagination. If life as she knew it had never happened at all. She left for Far Harbor, so I hot-wired the boat with my mind and set sail for the island. Skinny Arms and Beanie Guy, whose voice reminds me of someone from Fallout New Vegas, greeted me at the docks and informed me that Kasumi did indeed pass through their little settlement. But just then, the fog attacked. It's like the Mist, but instead of it being a mist with tentacle monsters that invade cities and uses interdimensional insects to implant babies in unwilling hosts, creatures emerge from the fog and lay siege to Far Harbor. They're weird looking, tougher than Jesus, and spit molten balls of lava from their face holes. It was here I realized that this may be more difficult than I anticipated, which was unfortunate, as I had just started Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC not long before this and stopped after I got mauled to death by a werewolf bear. I spent more of my ammo here than I should have. I shouldn't have spent any at all, since there were several NPCs that can't die, and would eventually kill the legendary Mirelurk on their own. But the day was won, no thanks to me, and the legendary Mirelurk dropped a nocturnal board. Avery dropped a few subtle clues that the folks of Far Harbor are in need of my assistance. I decided against it because her name is Avery, and in 7th grade, a kid named Avery sat in front of me in English and got his dandruff all over my desk. Both of them can drop dead for all I care. I got a free round of alcohol from Mitch, that's classic Mitch right there, and told Longfellow that I'd come to bargain. Together, we set out for Arcadia, so I could continue my search for Kasumi. The fog is irradiated, which brings us to radiation. To put it simply, radiation damage doesn't count as damage like a bullet to the eye or choking on watermelon does. It doesn't do damage, it just lowers your maximum health. It doesn't become fatal until you reach 1000 rads, therefore it doesn't matter. Any damage, regardless of how much radiation I have, will still kill me. As we marched up the mountain, we encountered a group of wild animals calling themselves wolves. I backed the fuck up, thinking I could get them to follow me so I could pick them off from a place they couldn't reach. Then I blew them up with a grenade. One of them was legendary, and was sure to drop something awesome. It very well could have been something awe-inspiring. I wouldn't know because I couldn't find the body. It was gone forever, like most of YouTube after Kappa takes effect. A Children of Adam stopped us in our path and bestowed upon me the gift of freezing my game for a minute or two. Not long later, Longnose and I got to Arcadia. The way he spoke to me made me think he wanted to come along on my adventures. I'm always willing to help out the elderly, which is why I told him to piss off and I never saw him again. Inside Arcadia, I met Dima. It explained as best it could to me and my simple brain what exactly it was and what it needed from me. But I needed something from him too. One of the tubes sticking out of his head would look great atop my Christmas tree, and, less importantly, I required the whereabouts of Kasumi. Before continuing my search, I sold a bunch of stuff to Dejin, bought myself a little combat rifle, and finally found Kasumi. She was as alive as anything programmed to feel alive could be. She wanted to know what Dima was really up to, why he was so nice and selfless and emotionless with his speaking. Never trust anyone who is monotone at all times. They're probably hiding something. I had a very brief conversation with Dumbo about the fog condensers and other nonsense before getting more information from Dima about what his true intentions were. What he and his constituents want is to live in peace in a place where a robot can pretend to be a person. To that end, there are some memories Dima locked away and purged from his head, like when I drunk dialed my landlord earlier this year. Once I regained consciousness the next morning, I removed the call from my phone and pretended it never happened. Back outside, I had two objectives: retrieve hard drives for someone and gather Dima's memories. I set off for the storage drives first. I got into a brief skirmish with a group of trappers living in a destroyed house by an irradiated lake. Ignoring the multiple shots I missed, it wasn't too terribly tough to remove their souls from our dimension. The legendary trapper was a problem at first, but my kindergarten teacher taught me well that there's no problem in life that can't be solved with a grenade. The legendary trapper's gift for me was truly worthless. I kept pressing onward and spent more than a few of my 9 lives on a trapper with an automatic weapon. Automatics always make these sorts of runs more difficult. They do less damage than semi-automatics, but that is irrelevant when a feather forcefully shoved up my left nostril is enough to kill me. I eventually used one of my few 44 Magnum rounds on his spine and found the storage drives for Dumbo. Some trappers nearby the Vim building bothered me in the same way most living creatures do. Then I arrived at the nucleus, the heart of the children of Adam. I allowed myself one attempt to wipe them all out, and when that failed, I spoke to Grand Zealot Richter about becoming a child of Adam. I drank the irradiated water from Adam's spring. My vision got wobbly, but my intestinal fortitude has more in common with the weeble wobble that won't fall down than your standard set of human intestines, so the shadow figure and green haze didn't bother me too much. The feral ghouls, specifically the reavers, at my vision's destination were a bit annoying. Anything with a spooky skull next to its name is a real problem to deal with. I eventually figured out the puzzle inside the glowing room, retrieved the sacred icon, returned to the Grand Zealot, went inside the worship chamber to hear the words of Confessor Tectus, and journeyed into the command center to brute force my way through all the pre-war defenses until I got to Dima's terminal. This was a little tricky. At first, I assumed the laser tripwires were all there were. I was very wrong. Not the most wrong I've ever been, but still pretty wrong. After all, I'm the same person who once got a -5% on a math assignment because I got every question wrong and forgot to put my name on it. The machine gun turrets mounted on the walls are weak, but devastatingly effective at their single task. You have very little time to destroy them before they take aim and fire at you with their laser pointer accuracy. The Protectrons were similar, annoyingly accurate and tougher than a turret to destroy. Then came the final defense force, the Assaultron. I'd gathered a staggering amount of mines in preparation for this assault. As I haven't played Elmo's number journey yet, 2 is a pretty big number to me. To my surprise, they were more than enough to destroy the Assaultron in its path. The few remaining turrets and robots were dealt with. I entered the command center's central control area, flipped the old power flipper, and nearly shit myself. A legendary Assaultron woke from its nap and came after me. I didn't even attempt to fight at first. I immediately ran away. As I fled, I took the occasional shot at the bitch and shut every door behind me until I had time to formulate a plan. Jet, Psycho, and a submachine gun were laughably ineffective. My teacher was right again. A grenade once again saved the day. I got a worthless piece of armor from it and could begin retrieving Dima's memories with Faraday's program. This took me far longer than it should have. I'm not a communist. I oppose the execution of those I don't like. Unless they deserve it, then it's alright. But whoever decided puzzles should be in a Fallout game, and mandatory ones at that, is shit. I'm gonna save you from most of the agony that I couldn't save myself from, and tell you that this was not in any way fun. You can't take damage in the simulation, so these can be completed the same way they'd be completed outside of a challenge. The first 3 were easy enough. The 4th one took longer but wasn't necessarily difficult. The 5th one was. I can't place all the blame on the game though, because I sorta forgot that you can store all the code blocks. Instead of storing them all and placing them as needed, I would manually move them from one location to another. This sped up gameplay probably showcases what I mean better than I could ever describe it with words and letters. Realizing that I'd been doing it all wrong the entire time was both amazing and incredibly frustrating. It wasn't even me that figured it out. I got stuck on the 5th puzzle and watched a video on YouTube to see how to do it. Had I not seen that video, I'd have never started doing it the way God Howard intended. Then I didn't even do it as intended. I was tired of puzzles and just wanted it to be over. Place a few things in a specific spot, and you'll trick the game into thinking that you did it properly. The code bugs retrieved their information, and that digital hellhole was finally filled in. Next came the task of finding 3 caches scattered around the island that Dima planted in the land before time. First, I bought and sold garbage with the Children of Atom. Then I set off for the Wind Farm kill switch code. Not long after leaving the nucleus, I encountered a group of beasts that were being led by a legendary Mirelurk Razorclaw. Believe it or not, radiation-based weapons don't really work on creatures that exist thanks to radiation. After I tried a shotgun and my corpse cartwheeled into the drink, I decided to just ignore them. I had not gotten anything useful from legendary enemies yet, no reason to assume this one would drop anything worthwhile. Fate had other plans. Not even 5 minutes later, I ran into a legendary glowing angler. My combat rifle was actually capable of doing a fair bit of damage to it and its companions. Dodging their spitballs wasn't all that difficult either. By the time the beast fell before me, I'd used a solid chunk of my ammo, and from its carcass, I found a pool cue. Cool. A large amount of bad things were between me and the first cache. I ignored them, traveled to the Vim building I discovered several pages ago, and got to work tracking down the next piece of the pie. Thankfully, the building and surrounding area were the base for super mutants. Compared to what lurks in the shadows on the island, these guys are a treat to fight. 2 of them, held up in a sort of building within a building, gave me some trouble for reasons I've already mentioned. Once they were dealt with, I spent a little while working my way through all the green guys atop the building. My 10mm pistol was far more effective against them than I would have thought, and one of them even had a missile launcher for me, which was a nice thing for it to do. Back inside, a few of the muties were rude enough to fight back. This here enforcer was a problem. I tried a multitude of different weapons against him, but none were effective enough to end his life before he ended mine. At least, none were effective until I pulled out the missile launcher. I killed his dog, as bonus psychological and emotional damage, weakening him for the barrage of bullets I was about to pump into his freakish body. He eventually died. I tried playing in what looked like radioactive waste, but was only sody pop. And I found Dima's second cache, which revealed Avery was a synth, proving I was right to not like her. Before leaving, I convinced Kyle to let me inside his chamber, which was where I found December's Child, a neat-looking legendary weapon that I never used once. I also found a custom set of power armor that I left behind because why would I need that, and left to find the nuclear launch key. More brutes and whatnot were camped out on the buildings in the area. Inside, the Harper Grand Hotel were even more. None of them were any sort of a threat to me, or got in the way of me completing the task at hand. Inside the safe room, I found a holotape, which pointed me towards a submarine near the Fringe Cove docks. Down in the water, within the submerged marine, I found the key. After taking the key, a bunch of monsters emerged from the ground, or wherever they call home, to be a nuisance. I really didn't feel like fighting them, so I swam away like the fugu fish and returned to Arcadia to talk to Dima about everything I'd found. He was not thrilled about most of it, especially the part where he had to remember that he hid his memories to keep him from remembering that he murdered someone and used a synth for his own sick ideas. His solution? Do it again. I like his idea. Kill someone in the name of peace. To accomplish this task, I had to track down some holotapes from the former confessor of the Children of Atom that Dima could use to create a web of digital lies that I could use to trap the current confessor. I used Dima's fake tape to convince Confessor Tectus that Confessor Martin was returning and looking for vengeance. But I had to tell him in private. I couldn't risk letting any children hearing me murder him. And murder him I did. I had to dispatch of his guards because that's what friends are for. Once they were all about as dead as my dog, I hid their bodies behind the wall and returned to Dima to let him know that the deed was done. His counterfeit Tectus was ready, and now Dima controlled both the Children of Atom and Far Harbor. Like a god, he could look down from his mountain and shape the wills of both populations. I convinced Kasumi to return home, left Far Harbor, tried to kill Kasumi and her parents, but that's not an option because Bethesda, and I beat Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC without taking any damage.
Hi, Billy Mays here with Zorbies.
It's often said that there are 9 circles of hell. Each offers its own unique form of torment based on the sins committed by those sent to hell. But Dante was a liar. There was a 10th circle of hell. I know this because I lived it. Can you beat Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC without taking any damage? I played through the opening bit of Nuka World many months ago in my Kami Whacker only video, so I had a solid idea of what I was getting myself into. To that end, I decided to go into it with the same character I used in my Far Harbor video for the sake of my sanity and to keep things consistent. The save I loaded was from before I started that DLC. I didn't want to be too overpowered going into it. Before journeying west to the Nuka transit place, I killed Trudy and her son for a bit of extra supplies. This video is about the Nuka world, not my adventures in mediocrity or irrelevant nonsense, so I'll simply point out that I set my max health to 1, so that any damage of any kind kills me and automatically reloads my most recent save. I did that before going west. I point that out because I spent a solid 25 minutes fighting my way through a raider camp with 1 health, even though it realistically didn't even need to be at 1 since I hadn't started the DLC yet. Once that was done, I arrived at the entrance to Nuka World, and I knew that I'd made a terrible mistake when a gunner assaultron with a skeleton head next to its name sprinted towards me like a fucking freight train. Luckily, I came prepared. If you're gonna fight a train, bring a nuke. That's what I did. I had 2 shots and played it safe by reloading a save several times to get the shot right. I wanted to kill them, not toast their marshmallows with a portable version of the superior siege weapon. A few of them died in the explosion. The assaultron didn't, and that bitch could bob and weave like nothing I'd ever seen before. I used jet and a submachine gun to annihilate it mere seconds before it would have melted me to death. More of the gunners survived the nuke than I would have thought. The sniper rifle I had, along with multiple sneak attacks, got the job done in the end. Even Commander Kaler, despite her weird name, fell before me. Inside the train station, I spoke to Harvey and convinced him to take a stim pack. He used that opportunity to remove the wolf from my eye sockets. It was all a ruse. He'll get what's coming to him one day. The code he'd been saving for a rainy day allowed me to restore power to the monoray, and I got a warning from the game that Nuka World is intended for those level 30 or above. Mathematics tells us that me being level 11 is close enough to level 30. I pressed onward, rode into the amusement park, and was informed by a voice that I had to pass through the gauntlet before dying. The plan was that the gauntlet kills me. I'd been through this before. The last time, pain meant nothing. The power armor and stimpaks I had let me brute force my way through the gauntlet like a raging walrus. This time, that is not an option. I had to take it slow. The first wave of the death obstacle course consisted of a rectangular room with multiple turrets on both sides. I tried to pick off a few of them before they opened fire, but it didn't really work out. One of them belonged to God and refused to die. A few feet inside, they all woke up and shit got real. As I've explained in other videos, turrets are a problem when you can't take any damage. They're stupid accurate and fire quickly. You're effectively a roadkill squirrel that I took a picture of with my first camera if they see you. The upside is that they don't fire constantly. You've got a brief window of time when they stop firing that can be used to kill them in a few shots because I'm playing on very easy. Take it slow now, this ain't a race, Doc Mitchell says, and this segment is not too difficult. Next was the trap room. Tripwires and limited edition flamethrowers that certain people use for clickbaity 10-minute long videos because nobody's ever seen a flamethrower before, right? There's really no reason why I should have died at all in this part. Childhood trips to Traverse City taught me not to run into barbed wire, and the tripwires can be deactivated without any issue. The wooden floor that collapses wasn't any problem either. That one's just a mild inconvenience at worst though. The fall isn't enough to kill you. A little ways up ahead, I proved that looking both ways before crossing the street means nothing when the car parked on the street is rigged to explode as you take your first step. The 3 doors were the kind of thing that only kills you once. Grenades drop, and I foolishly thought hiding behind a door would shield me from their blast. Intense radiation blasted me in the next room. You might be thinking that radiation bad, and you're right, radiation bad. But only when you reach 1000 rads. It doesn't do damage until it kills you. It just lowers your maximum health. It's not damage in the same way that being beaten with a sock full of smaller socks is damage. Another turret room revealed itself. They can be momentarily shut down with a terminal, which gives you enough time to get past them without having to destroy them. A small maze filled with more tripwires and bathroom scales that shame you to death when you notice how fat you've gotten. Jesus, look at you. Disgusting. I shot at a gas leak to see if it would explode, which it did. A series of tunnels had mines hidden behind and under destroyed cars. If you're a pussy like me, you can just spam VATS and catch most of them before they explode. You're expected to fall into this pit and fight Mirelurks, but you can jump from pole to pole and open the door to avoid them, then die anyway, because you went back to fight them and missed a bunch of shots. A bunch more traps are densely packed into a small corridor area. Nothing too difficult. Then a slight inconvenience. This room is filled with poisonous gas that hurts you continuously until you escape. As you can imagine, when you can't take any damage whatsoever, this is an issue. You have to grab a key and unlock a door, but that takes more than the roughly 1 second you have inside the room before you die. Hell, you can't even reach the door you're supposed to go through without dying in the first place. This is impossible. There are no tricks. This isn't radiation damage, so it can't be halted with rad-X or any other chems. There is only one way to proceed. When all else fails, look to the speedrunners, Tomato Anus specifically, for the answers. Unfortunately, this means that the last 30 minutes were a complete waste of time. To go forward, you must go back. I had to reload a save to before I arrived at Nuka World to get myself a set of power armor. There's a suit at the museum where I couldn't kill Preston because God hates fun. I only missed the jump from the church once. My appendix seemed to take most of the damage from the way my character keeled over. I entered the armor, snagged the minigun just in case, fast traveled to Lonely Chapel, and got dead by a radiation storm. I'm not entirely sure why that happened. Regardless, I fast traveled to a different area, returned to the transit center. Most of the gunners had already been killed. I reloaded the save after I wiped them out, found out that the power armor doesn't stop me from dying, which I should have known from the hundreds of comments telling me that I could still wear armor, since my health at 1 would still cause me to die. I went ahead and murdered Harvey immediately this time, traveled to Nuka World, and let the games begin. There is a glitch that can be performed with the power armor that lets you clip through walls. Enter third-person mode while in the power armor. Walk into your target wall. Look to the left as you exit the armor, and get back into the armor as quickly as possible. If done correctly, you'll be partially clipped through the armor itself, which will also clip you through the wall. The power armor prevented me from taking any fall damage, and I finally, after an hour and 47 minutes, arrived at the entrance to Nuka World. It took so much out of me to get here. I wasn't sure which ride to go on first or which exhibit to see first. I've always wanted to be torn apart by feral dogs. Seems like a really fun way to go. Really anything that involves more pain than you can even begin to comprehend is fine by me. I started with the Brad Burton Amphitheater and got a job from Mason, the most jacked face painter in the world. Rendezvous with his team and find a cache of weapons or something. Still not sure what to do, I resorted to the wiki. The man I was after was named Porter Gage, after the guy, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, he was at the Fizz Top Grill patio, towards the back of this area, near the Great Fizz Top Mountain. I entered the building, looked around a bit, and went to the patio. Because nothing can ever be easy, Gage wasn't there. While I had no idea what to do next, I was used to that. I was comforted by my own confusion. I eventually found myself inside the parlor where I spoke to Mags about a job. Put a special collar on someone to recruit them for an afternoon of activities. Then I stopped by the market and shopped around for a bit. My waypoint had me travel out of Nuka World back to the Gauntlet, which I accidentally got myself stuck in again. Reloading a save fixed that, even if it did put me back a bit. I noticed, while hurting myself with my own confusion, that both of my new quests had the same icon. That was a problem. It was an error that also caused both of them to direct me back to the Gauntlet. After getting mauled by a giant cricket twice, I was back at square one. The bottle cap bitch was extraordinarily rude to me and gave me another quest that lacked an icon. But I had hope. I'd completed the Gauntlet before. I knew where to go and how it ended, where all scores are settled, at the bumper cars. Gage and Coulter were both there, waiting for the fight. Unfortunately, they are the abusive parents of this DLC. I can say hello, but they don't interact with me or even acknowledge my existence. When I got to the wall, Coulter woke up and came after me with his belt. Still though, I couldn't damage him at all. My bullets just went right through him. A fat man did nothing either. But I had a plan. I would need to trigger the fight. I went back outside Nuka World to grab my power armor and entered the bumper car arena once more for the final confrontation. I got shot a few times as I exited my power armor because at a certain distance Coulter wakes up. Several minutes later, I managed to clip myself through the wall and be where I was supposed to be. I had to clip through a second door, but the stars aligned. I picked up the thirst zapper, spoke to Gage, and went to face Coulter. Almost. Turns out that by clipping through the wall, the doorways become invisible walls. Not a problem. I just clipped through the walls again, and the fight began. I had no time for bullshit. The squirt gun stunned the overboss, and Jet provided me with enough of an edge to retreat, pull out a fat man, and kill overboss Coulter. Everything was finally back on track. That was a lie. It wasn't. Coulter was dead, but I still couldn't speak to Porter Gage. Even after donning the overboss's armor, nothing worked. Clipping through the wall revealed that Porter was still between life and death. He existed, but could do nothing. So I went back to the drawing board. There is a failsafe, sort of. The tomato speedrun tactic was to kill the raider bosses. That's what I had to do. There are a few problems though. The first is that Fallout 4 is less forgiving about sneak attacks than Fallout 3 or New Vegas. If you stealth kill someone who's out in the open, everyone becomes hostile, so stealth attacks are almost worthless. I'm also about 17 levels lower than the game recommends, and my target in the parlor, William Black, is so unfathomably tough. Oh, and Red Eye, the guy who narrates as you go through the gauntlet, didn't shut up after I left Cola Cars. I had to turn down the voice volume because it got so annoying. Legend says he's still talking to this day. Anyway, I spent about 25 minutes in the parlor trying different tactics to kill everyone inside. I won't waste too much time on it because it was a colossal failure every single time. This was unlike anything I'd ever faced in a challenge before. It quickly became clear that at my current level, with my arsenal of weapons, I had no chance whatsoever. Jet and Psycho made no difference. My minigun was laughably ineffective. After I made up my mind about how I was going to proceed, I wanted to try something. A demonstration of sorts. It took 4 Fat Man shots to kill William Black. Admittedly, not all were direct hits, but they were still within several feet of him. That's what I was up against. I called it quits for the day. I needed time to mentally prepare for what I was about to do. I once again went back in time to before the DLC started. But this time, I reloaded a save after I beat Far Harbor. I was a higher level and had access to better weapons. It wasn't like I cheated and used console commands to spawn a bunch of different items. I played through Far Harbor and got all these the normal way. And the point isn't to beat Nuka World at level 1. Maybe one day, but not today. I also had to pick up power armor again because I'd be using the same glitch to skip the gauntlet. I took out everyone guarding the transit center, offed Harvey, rode to Nuka World, brute forced my way through the wall, and arrived at Nuka World for the 3rd time. Or the 2nd time. Who gives a shit. Back at the parlor, I used every trick at my disposal, including exiting the power armor to theoretically block a path to me. That didn't really work. I got into position, blasted the life out of Lizzie with 24 bullets, and everyone came after me. Then I died. I tried blasting Willie with a missile launcher and died immediately. My legendary shotgun did jack shit to Lizzie. A sneak attack with a hunting rifle barely left a mark. Dozens of shots with a submachine gun did next to nothing. I left, picked up a bunch of stuff from the market, and returned. 7 mines were laid down at their feet, and I set them off with a grenade. Neither died. From the safety of a room at the end of the hall, I chucked grenades at my foes. They certainly did some damage. How much, I couldn't say. I tried Jet, Psycho, and a missile launcher on them, and it did practically nothing. The 50 caliber handgun I'd had a few shots for could kill a normal operator with a single shot, and do a not insignificant amount of damage to the bosses. But there were too many people shooting at me for it to be a viable option. Even a stealth boy failed to protect me from their attacks. Another idea was to set mines all over the place to do damage to everyone once the fighting started. I thought I found a viable strategy when I hid in the sleep room and bullseyed grenades off the door frame and into those shooting at me on the other side of the wall. Even with everything I'd brought with me, the perks that boosted semi-automatic weapon damage, mines and grenades and missile launchers, it was impossible. So I went to check on one of the other bosses, Mason, pretty much the same as William. A stealth boy in VATS gave me an opportunity to do big damage, but he returned fire before I could kill him, and even if he didn't kill me, someone else would. I couldn't do it. Before giving up completely, there was one more thing I could try, similar to my last idea, just taken to the extreme. I time traveled to the Commonwealth one last time, this time to my last save before I beat Fallout 4 with legendary weapons. A level 26 character almost 10 hours into the game with a full supply of legendary weapons. The Institute had to be destroyed again, and for once, I actually had the chance to continue after the final cutscene. But unlike last time, I wasn't going to do this again. I pulled out all the stops in my preparations to wage war on the bosses of Nuka World. The first stop was Proctor Teagan's locked room, which was stocked with a Fat Man, mini nukes, a Gauss rifle, and a buttload of ammo. I accidentally triggered a Brotherhood of Steel Civil War when my hand slipped and I beat Teagan to death with a sledgehammer. Then I vaxxed myself out of his room and messed around with the power armor to try to install the jetpack I'd gotten from Captain Kells. The idea was that I could use it to fly somewhere safe before I instigated the assault on the bosses that are outside. I'm big stupid and couldn't figure it out. I stole the Fat Man and Mini Nuke from Cleo at Good Neighbor, and made one last stop at Bunker Hill to buy any relevant ammo that I could afford. The missile launcher made quick work of the gunners at the transit center. Even the Assaultron went down in a few shots. I did have to make sure to remove the Nerd Rage and Toughness perks before entering the DLC proper. But once that was done, I arrived at Nuka World for the final time. Whether I succeeded or failed was irrelevant. I wasn't doing this for a 5th or possibly even 4th time. I also wasn't going to waste time with things that might work. I started with William at the parlor. He's indoors, which means he'll be the trickiest to deal with. I ditched my power armor because it could only slow me down, loaded myself with a jet and psycho, pulled out a fat man, blasted William with it, and before time could catch up with me, I was outside. It worked. He was dead. I had the right quest, and everyone in Nuka World was out to kill me. They were now red, but didn't actually attack me. I'm not sure why. My guess is that because I'm technically the overboss, even though Coulter is still alive, they just let me do whatever I want. Or it's a glitch that happens when you do things this way. Either way, I spent a little while killing as many operators and raiders as I could, both to get easy experience and to get a solid supply of 7.62 ammo, because the operator sniper rifle is a useful tool to have. Then, towards the back of the park, I found Nisha. She's about as tough as Willy, but she's out in the open, which works to my advantage. I was feeling pretty confident at this point. Like when a 4th grader talks to a 3rd grader about the kind of math they're doing. You don't know what X is? Oh, that's right, I forgot. You're stupid. Don't worry, you'll grow out of it eventually. I tried a few different weapons out on Nisha. None of them really worked out very well, considering I died every time. After retreating a bit and using Jet, I blasted her with the operator rifle and finished her off with my explosive submachine gun. Now only one remained, Mason. I also got stuck in midair a few times immediately following Nisha's demise. Probably her bitch ghost or something. The second I opened the door to the amphitheater, I got eviscerated. Thankfully, I came prepared with 5 stealth boys. They didn't make me hidden, but they gave me enough protection that I wasn't assaulted immediately. I hoped to use the stealth boys and a silenced weapon to take out most of the goons near the entrance. It didn't work out very well, so I called all reliable and took the safe route. Jet and a fast man. Jet and a fat man. I killed Mason and left before they could do anything about it. With all the leaders killed, my tasks remaining were few. I tried speaking to Mackenzie in the market, but she pulled a porter and refused to acknowledge my existence. After killing the enemies in the area, I could speak to her and inform her that Nuka World now belonged to them. But there was one last thing that needed to be done. The power must flow to Nuka World. The power plant is far to the northwest, and the path to it is infested with formidable creatures. Compared to the bosses though, they were a complete joke. A Deathclaw went down in 2 shots from a Gauss rifle, and I arrived at the power plant. It took me more attempts and more time than it realistically should have to get through here. Feral ghouls were all over the place. Most could be killed in a single shot. The only issue was that I was using weapons I felt like using, not necessarily the most effective weapons I had on me. But I eventually made my way to the roof, pressed the button, restored power to Nuka World, watched the fireworks, and kinda beat Nuka World without taking any damage.